Hi, welcome to Why the Book Wins. My name is Laura, and today's video is part of a series I do where I compare books with their movie adaptations. And through these videos, I discuss why the majority of the time, when it comes to the book versus movie, the book wins. Now, having said that, I enjoy watching movies just as much as I enjoy reading books. Like, I love both. So I do give unbiased reviews of both book and movie, I think, for the most part. I also wanted to let you know that this is available as a podcast. And so these tend to be about 30 minutes long, but especially for ones that go over that, if it just works better for you to listen to it as a podcast, they are available. So just search Why the Book Wins in whatever podcasting platform you use. I will also link to them down below for Spotify and Google Podcast. For Spotify and Apple Podcasts, because those are the ones most people use. So yeah, if you would rather do that, those are available too. And before we get into this video, I do want to say that there will be spoilers for both the book and the movie. So if you plan on reading the book or watching the movie and do not want it spoiled, then go do that first and then come back and watch this video. Without further ado, let's get right into today's video. Hi, welcome to Why the Book Wins. My name is Laura, and today we are talking about The Lost Daughter, which is a book written by Elena Ferrante, published in 2006. And it might be considered a novella, I think, because it's less than 150 pages, so it's very short. And the movie The Lost Daughter is directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal and was released in 2021. And I'm going to start with a summary of the book and movie. If you are already aware of the story, you can always skip ahead using the chapters down below if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're listening to this as a podcast, then I guess you just need to hear the summary. So we have a 48-year-old professor named Lita who is vacationing over the summer. And while she is on the beach vacationing, she watches this family that is also on the beach. In particular, there is a mother named Nina and her daughter, Elena. And the daughter, Elena, has a doll named Nani, or she has different names for it. Anyway, Elena treats this doll as if it's her own daughter as well. And one day Elena goes missing and Lita is able to stay level-headed, and she finds Elena, brings her to Nina, and so Lita is kind of like the hero of the moment, finding the daughter. However, the daughter, Elena, is still very upset because her doll is missing. And so everybody is happy Elena has been found, but Elena herself is distraught over her missing doll. It is then revealed that Lita has stolen the doll. And throughout this, while interacting with this family, Nina, and, just with this doll she has stolen and won't give back for whatever reasons she doesn't even understand. We also get flashbacks into her life as a parent. We learn she has two daughters, and when the oldest was 7 and the youngest was 5, she left them for 3 years to pursue her career. However, after those 3 years, she does return to them, and in the book, when she's talking about this, she says that she was gone for 3 years and 36 days. So clearly, the fact that she knows the exact amount of time she was gone, it was a big deal in her life to leave, obviously, and then to return. And it's something she struggles with and deals with on a regular basis. And she knows the exact amount of days she was gone, and it kind of haunts her in a way. Like, she has guilt about having left them, but she also acknowledges that for a time, at least, being away from them was incredible and she loved it. And so just those conflicted feelings. And in general, this is a story about the ambivalence of motherhood, right? Being a parent and losing part of yourself when you have your kids. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. To get back to the summary, in the end, Nina and Lita connect and bond over being mothers. And in the end, they're bonding and talking about it. And then Lita tells her, she gives her the doll, and she's like, "Here, I took this." She could have lied and been like, "By the way, I found this. I meant to give it to you. Here it is." But instead, she's honest, and she's like, "I took this. I want to give it back to you." And Nina is so taken aback and upset. And she's like, "Do you realize how Elena has been driving me crazy for this doll the last few days? She's crying nonstop and she's sick and whatever." And she has a hat pin, which is like this long needle. And she ends up stabbing Lita with it in the side and then leaves. And that's basically the story. And the character of Lita, she is like the antithesis of, the perfect mother, or what a mother should be in our society, because people expect moms to be someone who is so self-sacrificing for their children and gives up their own wants and needs for the sake of their kids. And Gyllenhaal sees Lita, the director Gyllenhaal, sees the character of Lita as this is extreme example of motherhood, because I'm not a mom, for one. I want to preface that saying that. But moms need a breather, right? Parents need a breather. And Lita is an extreme example who takes a breather for over 3 years. And Lita does suffer the consequences of her selfish actions, as we see in this book and movie, and as we will get into. So this certainly isn't a book or movie that is condoning what Lita does. It's an extreme example showing motherhood, I guess, and the feelings mothers feel. Which, again, I'm not a mom. I don't know if this is universal, if every mom, like I would imagine every mom does have these conflicted emotions about motherhood at times, and they want to break from it. Like her husband, Lita, when they were young, her husband would travel for work, and his work seemed more important than hers, right? And so he was able to prioritize his job and travel for work and be away from the daughters, and it's fine. Whereas Lita, she was wanting to prioritize herself and her career, and she couldn't because she was expected to, be home with her kids and her daughters. Anyway, to get to the book review section of this, there are some books that when I finish them, I know right away what I'm going to rate it. This was not one of those books. After I finished it, I really had to think about it and decide how I felt about it and what rating I felt it deserved. And I went into this knowing literally nothing about the story. And it wasn't until after I finished it that I went back and read reviews. And so many of the reviews talked about how unlikable Lita was. And so I don't know what it says about me as a person who was reading this book. And I didn't find myself hating Lita the way some of the other reviewers did. I don't know. Yes, she acts selfish in a lot of ways, and she also acts in ways that don't make sense, like stealing the doll. And she herself acknowledges, she doesn't know why she did that. So she does things that don't make sense to her. But I think the author Ferrante just did such a great job at really putting you in Lita's shoes, and you could understand the decisions she made. I don't condone her choice, but you're able to see where she's coming from, I guess. And I also love the nuance and subtlety of the story in certain ways. This isn't one of those books where the author feels the need to tell you, this is a bad person, you don't like them. Instead, she just tells you the story and we see things from Lita's perspective, and the author leaves it up to us to decide what we think about it, And so I really love that. And this book has so many passages about parenthood and motherhood and the mother-daughter relationship that I found really interesting. There were some things I could relate to more so than others. Again, I'm not a mom, so some of that stuff maybe I couldn't relate to quite as much. But there was still just, whether I could relate to it or not, there were so many passages that I just found so fascinating and intriguing and made me want to learn more. And Lita, too, I thought was just such an interesting character. Yeah, I was intrigued by her as a person and knowing her thoughts about her children. Especially, the movie doesn't go into this, but the book, we see her relationship with her daughters in their teen years and how she views them and how they view her. And we'll get into that a bit more, just the mother-daughter relationship. But anyway, there's so much to really think about and dwell on in this book. And I enjoy reading books that are from the perspective of a child who has an estranged parent. And yet I've never read a book from the opposite end, of the parent who left. And so it was really compelling and interesting to read it from the parent's perspective in that situation. Anyway, this is a 4-star book, I decided, one I would highly recommend. I even thought of giving it 5 stars, but for now it's a 4-star read. I really loved it. And again, it's less than 150 pages, and I really like that Ferrante chose to just keep it short and focused. There were some things that she could have gone in more, she could have elaborated on more, but I think it worked well to just focus on the heart of the story and what Ferrante, the message she wanted to convey with this. Onto the movie, as I said, this is directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal, and this is her directorial debut, and I was very impressed. And Ferrante would only give the rights away to this book if it was directed by a woman. I guess Gyllenhaal approached her wanting to, I don't know if she wanted to produce it or what. I'm actually not sure. I shouldn't be saying anything because I don't know the details. But I do know that Ferrante said she would only give away the rights if it was directed by a woman. And I love that. I can't imagine a man directing this movie. It's it's a story about women, mothers, daughters, the female experience. And so I can't imagine a man directing this. Onto the acting, we have Olivia Colman, who plays Lita, who is the 48-year-old Lita. I don't know if I've seen any other movies with Colman, to be honest. I know she won an Oscar, and I know I should be watching her stuff, but this was the first one, and I was blown away. Her emotions are just so raw and feel so genuine, And when Lita is feeling emotional, and which is a number of times in this movie, and when she cries, like, I couldn't help but cry too, because her emotions just felt so real, and just it was amazing. And she definitely makes Lita a very sympathetic and pitiable character who acknowledges that she's selfish, and at the same time I found myself just feeling for her and her situation, you know? So yeah, I was very impressed with Coleman. There's so much of her acting that she does where it's just through her facial expressions, letting us know what's going on inside her head and what she's feeling. And yeah, so without even saying words, she just conveyed everything that needed to be conveyed just through her facial expressions. So very impressed. And then Jessie Buckley plays young Lita when she is a mother to her 2 young daughters during the time leading up to her leaving them. And again, she was amazing. Both Buckley and Coleman were nominated for Oscars. I think only Coleman was nominated for a SAG award, but both of them were nominated for Oscars, and they were well deserved. Like, when she's a mom, you can just see and feel the stress she is under. She tries to balance her life, and as she is just so exhausted by trying to balance her life and trying to mother these 2 daughters, and just at her wit's end. And also when she is at the conference and she just feels so free, and having her work be acknowledged and appreciated, and just that feeling she gets, you know, the smile she has, and just how she feels so free and so fulfilled when someone acknowledges her work, right? For who she is as a person, because she feels like as a parent, she is losing herself. And so when people acknowledge her for who she is outside of being a mom, you know, it makes her feel so fulfilled and happy and free. Anyway, also with Jessie Buckley, I mentioned her in my episode for I'm Thinking of Ending Things. She was in that. And I remember at the time, that was the first thing I'd seen her in. And I remember being like, wow, like, we'll be seeing her in a lot of stuff, because she was so good in that movie too. The characters are totally different, but she's amazing in both. So anyway, very impressed with Jessie Buckley as an actress. Dakota Johnson plays Nina, the young mother at the beach. And I don't know if I may have seen a few things with her, but definitely not a lot. But I thought she was great, especially in the scene where they're at the toy store and she's holding Elena, and Elena won't let go, and she is just like, you know, telling her to stop it, and just because she herself is like just at the end of her rope with being a mother and dealing with Elena, who is just crying and being so difficult because Elena doesn't have her doll. And so just that stress she's under, and her connection, feeling a connection with Lita over being mothers. Yeah, I thought the connection they feel and the conversations they have just felt very real. And yeah, I was impressed with Johnson. And then Ed Harris, I wanted to mention, he plays Lyle, the man Lita is renting her apartment from. And he's in a few scenes. He's definitely not like a huge character, but he is great. I'm a fan of Ed Harris. So as far as the overall, you know, the changes between the two and just discussing the themes and whatever, I'm going to start at the end, because the book and movie both start at the end. So the book, it begins with her in a hospital, and we hear that she has crashed her car into a guardrail. However, she is not injured, aside from a weird lesion she has in her side that nobody knows where it came from. And in the book, in her internal dialogue, she says of the lesion's origin, "At the origin was a gesture of mine that made no sense, and which precisely because it was senseless, I immediately decided not to speak of to anyone. The hardest things to talk about are the ones we ourselves can't understand." And so, yeah, as I said, we find out at the end of the book that the reason she got this lesion on her side is because Nina had stabbed her with the hat pin. The very hat pin that Lita herself had bought for Nina. And after she is stabbed with the pin, she is like packing her stuff to leave, and then she gets a phone call from her daughters, and both of them are asking in unison, like, "Why haven't you called us? What's going on? Let us know if you're dead or alive." And Lita responds saying, "I'm dead, but I'm fine." And then that's the end of the book. Although we know from the beginning that after this phone call, she gets in her car, she's driving, she crashes into the guardrail, and then she's in the hospital. And in the beginning of the book, in the hospital, we learn that her ex-husband, her daughters, and some work colleagues are either there or on their way to be there. And then the movie ending, though, so, same thing. Nina stabs her, she's packing her stuff, she's driving, and as she's driving, she doesn't crash her car, I don't know if it specifically shows it, but anyway, she gets out of her car and goes to the beach, a different beach, where she collapses, and then she wakes the next morning, and I think she calls her daughter in the movie correct me if I'm wrong, but in the book, the daughters call her. I know that. In the movie, I think she called one of her daughters. Anyway, so she's talking to her daughter, and the daughter asks, like, oh, how are you? Are you dead or alive? Like, you haven't been calling me. In the movie, she responds with, I'm alive, which is very different from the book, where she responded saying, I'm dead. And also in the movie, she has an orange, which I don't remember where she got the orange from. And I heard someone else speculate that the orange is just part of her imagination. And I heard someone else speculate that this whole scene on the beach is either her imagination or she died and this isn't really happening. I kind of took it at face value where this is happening. But anyway, so she's talking to her daughter. She's saying she's alive. And she starts peeling the orange, which is significant because in the book and movie, she would peel oranges so that it was like all in one piece. And they would call it a snake. And her daughters loved watching her peel this orange. And that was like a pleasant memory from raising her kids. Although this memory, peeling the orange, it's also the last thing she does for them before she leaves them for those 3 years. And the scene in the book when she's peeling the orange before she leaves them, it reads, I took the orange and began to cut the peel. The children stared at me. I felt their gazes longing to tame me, but more brilliant was the brightness of the life outside them. New colors, new bodies, new intelligence, a language to possess finally as if it were my true language. And nothing that seemed to me reconcilable with that domestic space from which they stared at me in expectation. I ought to make them invisible, to no longer hear the demands of their flesh, as commands more pressing, more powerful than those to which came from mine. I finished peeling the orange and left. From that moment for 3 years, I didn't see or hear from them at all. But to get back to the ending, I sort of went on a tangent there. But so the endings are, on one hand, they seem very different because she says that I'm dead, but I'm fine. Whereas in the movie, she says she's alive. In the movie, it could be seen as her coming to terms with herself and acknowledging that she is now alive and she's peeling this orange, which is reflective of her time as a mother. And maybe she's come to peace with her past and her decisions because throughout this whole movie, she has been tormented by her past and Nina has caused her to reflect on her own decisions as a mother. And so maybe now at the end, she's finally at peace with herself. Although you could say that too about the book where she says, I'm dead, but I'm fine. So maybe saying she's dead, she acknowledges that she's a cold, selfish person, like she's dead, but she's accepting herself for who she is, but maybe she's fine, and maybe she's finally fully accepting herself. Because she talks at other times admitting that she's a selfish person. But then from other things I read, it seems like most people don't think of this as an ending, like a positive ending where she is at peace with herself or comes to terms with who she is or is, a turning point in her life. So I don't know. It really is up into interpretation. So I'd love to know what you guys think of the ending. Specifically, like with the movie, do you think when she wakes up on the beach, is that reality or is that in her head? Is she dead and this is like the afterlife or something? I don't know. Someone else also said that it was her just going back to what she's always done, which is parenting on her own terms, calling her daughter when it works for her and when she needs that reassurance as a mom. That, I feel like that interpretation is pretty different than the book though, because in the book it talks about how her daughters like never call her and it's always her calling them until the end when they call her. And she says how she is very touched by the fact that they're calling her and asking her how she's doing. Yeah, sometimes I take things at face value. I try to see the symbolism and the deeper meaning, obviously. But I feel like with this one, I'm not really sure what the ultimate ending is supposed to be saying, if I'm being honest. But anyway, let me know your thoughts on the endings. Do you see it as more uplifting, like a turning point in her life? Or is it just her going to continue being the way she is, which is someone who is selfish? Anyway, continuing on. To talk about just her having left her daughters, another change is that when she is telling Nina in detail about having left her daughters, Nina asks, well, like, if it was so amazing being away from them for 3 years, why did you come back? Why did you go back to them? And in the movie, Lita says that I started to miss them and I'm a selfish person. So when I started to miss them, I returned. And that is very different from the book, because in the book, she asks her, like, why did you return to them? And Lita responds, because I realized that I wasn't capable of creating anything of my own that could truly equal them. And then to continue on what the book reads, Nina had a sudden contented smile. So you returned for love of your daughters? No, I returned for the same reason I left, for love of myself. Nina again took offense. What do you mean? That I felt more useless and desperate without them than with them. And then in the book, she also confesses about having left her daughters when they're in the toy store. So Nina's sister-in-law is the pregnant woman. In the movie, her name is Callie. In the book, her name is Rosaria. Anyway, I'll just call her Callie for this. Anyway, they're in the toy store and Callie is there with Nina and Elena. And that's when they ask her, like, oh, what were your daughters like at this age? And she just straight up tells them, like, I don't remember. I left my kids, when one was 5 and the other was 7, so I don't remember much from that time. And initially when I was reading this, I thought she was just messing with them and lied. But then we learned that that really is the case. Whereas in the movie, she doesn't tell them that. They ask, what were your kids like at this age? And she says, oh, I don't remember. And then she gets dizzy and she has to leave. And so the movie definitely builds up to this reveal, the fact that she does leave her daughters. Whereas in the book, it's revealed less than halfway through the book, fairly early on, we are told this. And also because Callie, which in the book as I said, her name is Rosaria, I think. Anyway, because of this, because she hears that Lita had left her daughters, it makes her see Lita differently, and she doesn't want Nina hanging out with her because she thinks she'll be a bad influence. Also, to talk about Callie, the pregnant woman, in the book and movie, she also, she comes across as someone who thinks she knows all about motherhood because she's pregnant. But we see that she really doesn't understand the harsh realities of being a mother, because Nina and Lita connect on that level because they know how hard it is to be a mom and how exhausting it is and how much you have to give up. Callie, because she is just pregnant and has not yet had her child, she has more of an optimistic view, and the part where she takes Elena in the toy store and shows that she has a way with kids because she got Elena to, stand on her own. And so I thought the movie did a really good job conveying that, because in the book, it's kind of described through Callie's actions and Lita's thoughts, whereas the movie conveyed it through Callie's actions, but also the conversation she has with Lita. You just see that Callie thinks she knows everything, but Lita shows her you don't know anything yet. But anyway, back to Lita leaving her daughters. Sorry, I feel like I'm jumping all over the place here. But in the book, we learned that at some point she had written her daughters a letter. She wrote each of them a letter explaining herself and why she had left them all those years before. But then the daughters, not only do they never bring up the letters, they also just never bring up the fact that she left them to begin with. So it's something that they just don't want to talk about. And the fact that in the book, Lita writes them letters explaining herself, it shows that she has tried to come to terms with her actions, and she also wanted forgiveness from them, I'm sure. But we see that her daughters, they were traumatized by her actions, and they either weren't ready to forgive her for it, or they were just too traumatized to even talk about it, And then in book and movie, we get a lot of flashbacks to Lita as she is raising her kids, and also the 2 girls who play the daughters. They were incredible. I was very impressed. Anyway, we see, the stress Lita is going through, and she is trying to work, but there's a scene where she and her husband are both working on something, and Lita is the one who has to, give up her work to go take care of the kids because the husband is busy on the phone and his work matters more, right? And in this scene, she goes to take care of her kids, and the daughter has a cut on her finger and is asking Lita to kiss it, to make the pain go away, but Lita refuses to. And in the book, this scene reads, I was frightened and yelled at her. I couldn't leave her alone for a moment. There was never time for myself. I felt like I was suffocating. It seemed to me that I was betraying myself. For long minutes, I refused to kiss her wound, the kiss that makes the pain go away. I wanted to teach her that you don't do that. Only Mama does it, who is grown up. And by the way, in the book, the daughter hurts her finger because she's trying to cut an orange like a snake. And so she feels like she needs to teach her daughter a lesson, being only grown-ups can do that. And I'm a grown-up, you're not. And then also with Bianca, we have the scene in the movie where she hits Lita, and Lita gets annoyed, and she takes her into the room and slams the door and causes the glass to break. And this happens in the book, but in the book, Lita also starts hitting Bianca back. And so Bianca initially thinks it's a game, and they're hitting each other back and forth. But then at some point, Bianca realizes it's not a game because Lita is hitting her harder. And so that was left out of the movie. And then to talk about the doll that Lita steals. So when Lita is reflecting on the fact that she stole this doll, she thinks, an infantile reaction, nothing special. We never really grow up. And I think this reflects back to, when she doesn't want to kiss her daughter's finger and she's like, I'm a grown up, you're not. And how but really she herself acts childlike in a lot of ways, right? Like being stubborn and being like, no, I'm not going to kiss your finger, or stealing the doll, a childlike infantile reaction. And then even not giving up her seat when they needed her chair at the beach. Rosario or Callie approaches her and asks her to move and she refuses. And yeah, it was annoying the way they were being, Nina and Rosario, Callie's family, were being very pushy and being like, oh, like this is ours, you gotta move. And so Lita is just like, I'm not gonna be pushed around by you, I'm gonna stay where I am. But really that's kind of a childlike response, right? Like just suck it up and move over to another chair, right? Is it worth it to make a scene about this? Not really. And yeah, just wanting control over the situation, I guess, is something that comes up again a few times too, like that right there, where she controlled the situation by being like, I'm not moving the chair. And then in the movie theater, when the guys are being super disruptive towards, with the movie, which obviously was so annoying, and she tries to control the situation by being like, hey, you guys got to stop, and I'm going to call the usher, but then the usher isn't able to do anything, and she just ends up leaving. And again, we'll get into this, but this just is symbolic of how things disrupt what was supposed to be a good thing or what was supposed to be the perfect life or the perfect vacation, and how these things disrupt it and ruin it for her. But anyway, sorry, I feel like I'm being so scattered. I feel like I just have so many thoughts about this book and movie, and there is so much to it. And I tried to write down my thoughts in a coherent, linear type fashion or something, but I feel like as I'm actually recording this, I'm bouncing around all over the place. So I apologize. I hope this isn't too confusing. But anyway, to get back to the doll. Stealing the doll, it represents a lot of different things. Like for one, Elena, the daughter, is very attached to this doll and she treats it as if it's her own daughter. And she's very distraught when it leaves. Whereas Lita, she left her daughters. She chose to leave her daughters, whereas with Elena, the doll was stolen. Anyway, Elena is so upset by the loss of her daughter, which is her doll, and maybe it bothers Lita because she left her daughters and she wasn't that distraught about it, at least not initially. And so Elena has more feeling about this doll than Lita did about her own daughters. But also stealing the doll, she can be a good mom to this doll because it's easy to be a good mom to the doll, right? Like the doll doesn't actually need you and require much about you. You can be a good parent on your terms to a doll. She can clean it up and buy it new clothes and do this or that. And it's pretty easy. She can also store it away in a cupboard when she doesn't want it around. And so it's an example of her parenting style, I guess, in some ways, right? Where she wants to be a parent on her terms. And also when Elena's doll is taken, Elena seems to regress, where I'm not sure how old she was, maybe 5 or 4 or something. But when her doll is missing, suddenly like she needs to have her binky and she wants to be in a stroller and she won't walk. And so she kind of regresses in age because she's missing this doll. And again, going back to Lita acting in childlike ways. And also Lita hated her childhood. She had a really bad childhood from her perspective, at least, and did not have a good relationship with her mom. And in the book, there's a part where she goes and she weighs herself and has herself measured and she's lost weight and she appears to be shorter. And she's like, this is like my worst nightmare, is the fact that I return to being a child and have to relive my childhood again. And then there is a part in the book, in both book and movie, the doll has like this murky, muddy liquid inside of her that Lita gets out of her. And in the book, there's a line where she is like getting the gunk out of the doll's stomach, and it reads, "You keep your liquid darkness in your stomach. I too was hiding many dark things in silence." And so yeah, the dark, gross stuff inside her stomach, inside the doll's stomach, represents the darkness that Lita has within herself that she doesn't want to let out the way the doll is letting it out. But obviously through the course of this book, she does kind of let that darkness out of her, And to talk about symbolism, which obviously the doll symbolizes a number of things, which we just talked about, there are a few things in this book and movie that seem very symbolic. And the movie follows the book so closely, like they included so many details from the book. I was very impressed. But some of the things that are in both book and movie that are symbolic are, the cicada she finds on her pillow. And then the pine cone that mysteriously hits her in the back really hard. And the fruit that is on the table, which on the surface looks good, but then when she picks it up, she sees that it's rotting and gross. And then, of course, the doll itself represents, her trying to be a mom and the way her momming style, if that makes sense. Anyway, all those things like the cicada and the rotted fruit and the guys in the movie theater and, the pine cone hitting her back, they can all represent things that are disrupting her vacation, right? She wanted to go on this dreamlike vacation and have a great time, but it wasn't as good as she thought it was going to be, and it was disrupted and ruined by things. And so this is a theme because, when she became a mom, she thought it was going to be a good thing and a good life, but then it wasn't, and things disrupted her motherhood, and she realized it was harder than she thought. And then when she leaves them, she thought that life was going to be, the paradise and her answer to things. But that also wasn't as fulfilling and was disrupted by various things that let her just return to her daughters. And so I guess, I watched a video, which I will link to, which talks about this aspect really well about paradise being ruined, right? Whether it's the paradise of being a mom, the paradise of choosing herself and her career, or the paradise of this vacation, and all these things that disrupt it and ruin this paradise, and it's never as good as you hope it will be, I guess, is a kind of a theme in this. And then, to talk about the child-parent relationship, mother-daughter relationship. So like I said, Lita did not have a good relationship with her own mom. And Lita's mom would often tell her, I'm just going to leave you. I'm going to leave. And she would say that all the time. And so Lita, as a child, would be in bed at night scared that she would wake up and her mom would be gone. However, her mom never actually leaves. She herself is the one that ends up leaving. So this is also about how, the chain of a parent and child, and then their child and their child's child, and how we try to stop the chain of events that happen, but then how we end up becoming what we're not trying to be, if that makes sense. Break the chain of parenting style. But her mother always said she would leave. And even though she didn't, that was obviously in Lita's head. And she ended up leaving her own daughters. And she also says that her mom seemed repulsed by her, and she compares it to, a food that you're pushing away from you. And she feels like she was the plate of food and her mom just pushed her away. And when she turned 18 and was able to move out and leave her mom and leave her hometown, it was this huge moment in her life to get away from it all. And yet she herself almost became like her mom anyway, despite getting away from it. But anyway, I wanted to share just a couple passages just about parenting or motherhood or whatever that I found interesting. My daughters make a constant effort to be the reverse of me. How foolish to think you can tell your children about yourself before they're at least 50, to ask to be seen by them as a person and not as a function, to say, I am your history, you begin from me. Listen to me, it could be useful to you. And then the last one, I realized long ago that I've held on to little of myself and everything of them. Even now, I was looking at Gino through the filter of Bianca's experiences, of Marta's, according to the tastes and passions I imagine as theirs. And there were a lot of passages like that again just made me reflect on life and relationships. But anyway, the last section I want to talk about is just men in this book and movie. And so one thing, we hear that Nina's family are bad people. And again, this is one of those tangents that Ferrante could have explained, being this is how they're bad people. But I'm glad she didn't, because it didn't really matter how they were bad, right? The story isn't about them. The story is about mothers and daughters. And like I said, just being a woman and the pressures of motherhood. And so it would have distracted from the heart of the story to be oh, and here's more about Nina's family, because really it didn't matter. But anyway, I read an article and it talked about men and what they represent in the movie specifically. And so I thought I would share this quote. Men are in the world of Lita and Nina and Elena and even Mina, which Mina is the name that Lita had given to her childhood doll, which we see in the flashback because she gives her childhood doll to her daughter and her daughter ruins it. And then she throws it out the window. Anyway, that's who Mina is. Men are, in the world of Lita, Nina, Elena, and even Mina, deeply beside the point. Satellites orbiting around their central world, annoyances to be dealt with and expelled, or dangers to be dodged. Yet each of these women live a life structured by male intrusions, expectations, and impositions. The reference to Zeus's apocalyptic, cataclysmic rape of Leto, which results in Helen, another woman whose mere existence so agitates men that they launch the Trojan War, is pointed. Lita is experiencing all of this on the beach in Greece to underline the point. Mothers and daughters for millennia are always living in the brutal world of men and trying to carve out their own world inside of it. In the end, she can't outrun the facts of the world in which she lives. She is happy and miserable, full of love, and also frustrated by it. She's no heroine, not someone to emulate. But as she sees herself in Nina and even Elena, they can spot a kind of future in her. They are all a piece of one another. Daughters like them, and mothers too, are always getting lost in the world. The older they get, the more they realize it's their own responsibility to find themselves. And to talk about the title, real quick, side tangent, The Lost Daughter, I believe, refers to Lita, because she herself is lost and trying to, like I said, come to peace with her actions in her life and try to balance motherhood with her career, because she values both of them, right? And she feels lost as well because she herself did not have a good relationship with her mother. And so, yeah, she is the lost daughter in this. But anyway, another thing about men in the movie I want to talk about is how, I think specifically in the movie, the book too, but there are multiple men we come across who have left their children. So the hitchhiker, which in book and movie, they meet these hitchhikers, and they're one of the moments that lead Lita to decide to leave her daughters. Anyway, the male hitchhiker has left his sons. And then Lyle, the guy who she is renting from, his kids live in America. Meanwhile, he's been in Greece for the last 30 years. And then even Tony, who is the husband of Nina, he's gone a lot of the time. He'll show up for the weekends and then he's gone again. So he's kind of absent from his kid's life. And yet the males being absent from their kid's life is more socially acceptable and they're not as judged for it. Whereas Lita, who also leaves her children's life, is very much judged for having done so, right? But to talk about whether I like the book or movie more, so in the beginning of both, we see Lita observing Nina and her family, and I think this part especially worked really well for the movie because we're observing this family, and so it worked well for a movie. But a lot of the book is internal dialogue and flashbacks to Lita's life. However, the movie did a great job conveying those things. And there is the moment where she has dinner with Will, and this happens in both book and movie. But in the movie, she tells him more about herself and her daughters, and that wasn't in the book, but the movie used that as an opportunity to express some of these internal thoughts that Lita is having without the use of a narrator. And so I thought they just did a great job at conveying all the emotions Lita has and showing her past and what she's going through wonderfully. Honestly, this was just a fantastic adaptation, and it follows the book so closely. Like I said, the only big changes, there's things that are left out, which I kind of touched on as far as her own mother and the letter she wrote to her daughters. And the book goes more into how she feels about her daughters and especially the teenage years and dealing with that. But anyway, the movie is an amazing adaptation and it follows the book so closely. I was very impressed, especially with some of the small details that they included. And overall, I think I like the movie better. Again, Coleman, she helped make the character just even more sympathetic and even more pitiable. And again, the scenes where, in the toy store, there's two different scenes where she is talking about having left her daughters. I think particular when she buys Nina the hat pin, she is telling her about having left her daughters. And so you have that where Coleman is just so incredible and so emotional talking about this. And then we flash back to the event when it actually happened, when she's peeling the orange for them and then leaves, and the argument she's having with her husband. And it was just so poignant, I guess would be the right word. And I don't know how someone could watch this movie and not tear up at all for the whole duration of the movie. But that scene in particular is what got me the most. And yeah, just the whole message of this, because Nina as well, she's a mom who also just she's looking to Lita before Lita reveals she stole the doll. Nina is looking to Lita, as this older woman who has been through motherhood, looking to her for reassurance and to be it gets better, right? This turmoil or this, shattering or this explosion going on, it passes, doesn't it? And how she confides in Lita that she too sometimes wants to just escape. Again, the ambivalence she feels about her life and feeling the only thing worthwhile she's done is create Elena, but she doesn't even know anything about herself. That's sort of a passage that is said in the book. And yeah, going back to the idyllic mother who always puts her kids first. And then we see Lita who puts herself first before her kids. And again, she suffers the consequences because here she is now on vacation by herself. She seems lonely at times, right? And, the consequences of being a selfish person. But anyway, ultimately, even though I'm not a mother, I felt touched by this story in the book and in the movie. However, the movie made me cry, whereas the book didn't. So I think for that alone, I think I'll say the movie wins because it made me feel even more emotion. But it's just getting those visuals. And again, Coleman and Buckley, their performances were just so powerful. It's so emotional. And I was just very impressed. And Gyllenhaal did an amazing job directing this. And she herself is a mother. She said how she couldn't imagine leaving her kids. But I'm sure, like we said, this is the antithesis and the extreme example. But yeah, I thought it was amazing. I love them both. But I think I will say the movie wins here on this one. But anyway, comment down below what you think. Again, there's a lot that is up to interpretation with this book and movie, so I'm curious how you guys interpreted some of this. But thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and to like this video, and I will see you next time. Bye.